Hey, Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform. You can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today is Melissa Cartagena, who is Senior Director, Head of Digital Advertising at AutoNation. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more about what you do, and I'm excited to hear of your story and your journey. But before we dive a little bit into your journey and what you have been doing to get up there, if you could just let the listeners know a little bit more about your background, your cultural background, and where you grew up.
So my family is originally from Puerto Rico. I've spent many summers in Puerto Rico with my grandparents, with my family, and I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, about 4 blocks away from Coney Island.
Oh, you all the way at the end over there.
Yep, right on the water. Lived by the beach my entire life.
Oh, yeah, that was always a ride out there. I'm from the Bronx native. Going to Coney Island was like the spot during the summertime, but that was a long trip.
Yeah, the F train was right behind my building. Is the F train. You can hear the doors open and close.
Ding, ding.
Yep.
Okay. So you said both your parents are Puerto Rican?
Both my parents are Puerto Rican. Both of them were born in Puerto Rico in 2 different cities. And my father was born in Ponce. My mother was born someplace in the northern part of Puerto Rico. I can't remember the name of the city off the top of my head right now, but she spent a lot of time there. My father really moved at a young age to New York, like a lot of Puerto Ricans did. They all gravitated to New York City. And my mom was in and out of New York, but her family eventually did move to New York, and that's how she met my dad. And eventually she went back and she finished school there before the two of them decided to get married and have children.
And being of Puerto Rican descent, what does your culture mean to you?
So, Puerto Ricans are very, very passionate people. We love deeply, we're very family centric, and we truly value respect within the family. It's who I am and who I'll always be. So that's, the culture really means a lot to me, but for me, it really does mean deep love and respect.
And you said you had, before your parents had children, siblings wise, how many do you have?
I have 2 brothers. I have an older brother who's only about 13 months and 2 days older than me. And I have a younger brother who's 17 years younger than me, interestingly enough. And it's funny because we talk about like when my parents had kids and they got married at a very, very young age. And my father was in the Army. And when he was in the Army, he was stationed in Greece when I was born. So I'm actually probably the only Puerto Rican that's ever been born in Athens, Greece, which I think is pretty cool. So.
Okay. You better drop that right there. I like how you were very exact also with your brother's the difference. You're like, oh yeah, 17 months and a quarter, is the difference in regards to age.
Oh yeah. My older brother and I, we were like, what do they call it? Twins? Like we just were a year apart, but we were so close in age that when we got to high school, I was like, see you later. He went to a different high school than me. Thank goodness. Cause I just could not be in his shadow anymore.
That's when that separation comes through.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we're talking about your childhood. We were kind of touching on it right there. Like, what were like some of the challenges you face that kind of helped you into picking or moving into your profession today?
So being raised in Brooklyn was interesting enough. Obviously, when you're raised in a city, you learn to be really thick-skinned about a lot of things. It's just a different way of life. I'd say it's a lot harder than what a lot of other people may go through in smaller towns that, everybody knows your name, first name and last name or what have you. But, also being Puerto Rican and growing up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood was interesting for me. There was probably maybe about 5 to 6 families in my neighborhood who were Catholic. And of those families who were Catholic, 3 of those roughly were actually Puerto Rican. And oddly enough, their parents went to school with my parents. So they all kind of knew each other from when they lived in Manhattan, in the Baruch projects out there. And it just, they knew where they were living and they kind of gravitated to this neighborhood. So it was like a mixed neighborhood, but for the most part, it was predominantly Jewish, which was different because I always felt different from the crowd. And our values and familial connections were definitely different. Our religion was different. But, like I mentioned earlier, like just living in Brooklyn in general was challenging for a young kid. Like I said, I learned to have thick skin, for lack of a better phrase. But, I learned to read the room at a young age, and it helped me become a really good judge of character as I got older and started to pursue my career.
That is a life skill right there. That
it is.
And I think that anyone in the inner city could, if you really tap in, you have to really tap into that, reading the room, because there's so many obstacles that come your way that, you could be on a train and randomly something happens in the far corner, but it escalates even more, so just being able to really like read the room, see who's around you. I think that kind of helps some of us that are in the inner city utilize that life skill now when we're in corporate America and read the room differently.
Exactly. And it just keeps you grounded and it keeps you really self-aware.
Yes. That is important. Sometimes, people might see all the fluff, all the nice things in front of them, and they kind of forget to be grounded even through those moments. But, coming from that environment where you had to kind of like somewhat be protective and make sure you really look left and right before you cross your street,
That's the thing about growing up in a city like New York, in one of the boroughs, or in Manhattan. Like, you really do have to be aware of your surroundings, and you do sort of grow up having this protected wall around you. I noticed that when I moved to Florida after I graduated high school. Like, it was hard for me to make friends when I moved because I had already had my friends in Brooklyn. And then I came to a new environment, and it was super challenging because I wasn't sure who I could trust and who I wanted to let in. So, you learn over time that you have to, watch those barriers, and you start to knock those walls down as you get older. But as a young teenager going into your early 20s, like, that's hard to maneuver around.
No, it is. It really is. It really is. And when people are trying to get to know you, and they're trying to be a part of you, and building that friendship, and you're like still got your guards up. Now let's talk a little bit about that educational background, because you mentioned you moved to Florida, but I get educational background. What was your major?
So I majored in psychology, but school was like a tough thing for me. Like, growing up in Brooklyn, there were a lot of kids in my neighborhood that like were, they were all going to go to college, state college, all this stuff. And I had friends that were like, yeah, they weren't really interested. And I wasn't really sure. I was planning to go to Brooklyn College. That was where I was going to be. I had no problem with that. But when my family moved down to Florida, I had to go to a community college down here for a couple of years. And I was still trying to figure it out, right? I was kind of not happy being in Florida. So I kind of went back and forth and didn't go to school, went to school, then decided not to. And then I met somebody over time that said to me, don't you want to be something someday? Like, something, you want to do something important with your life? And at the time that it was said to me, I was like, whatever. But then after a while, I was like, that kind of resonated with me. And I decided to go back full-time to college and get my degree in psychology. And I had all intention to actually use those skills in like a high school setting, like to mentor young teenagers as they're going through their high school years. That was my intention. And then later on, after I finished my BA, I took the long extended route with my bachelor's degree. I actually moved to Arizona because I wanted to go to ASU, Arizona State University, to get my master's degree and then, go into counseling. And when I got to Arizona, it was so different than Florida, and it was so different than New York that I felt like I didn't plan that out. In my mind, it sounded great, but when I got there, it was not so great. It was really hot. It was not my scene. way slow, definitely very family oriented, but I was single and in college. Like I wasn't there to have a family. But eventually I did within a year. So I held back on my master's degree, and I had my daughter. And, went through some rough times for a little while being out west. I was in Arizona for a bit, then I was in Colorado for a bit. And
you was moving.
I've lived in a bunch of different cities, but I always knew that my core was my family. They were my baseline. And for that reason, I came back to Florida, and I came back with my daughter. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I came back as a single mom, and I was okay with that.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had to do right by my daughter and make sure she had a roof over her head and do right by myself. So when I came back, I held off on getting my MBA for several years till she was about 5. That's when I went back to school. But it was after I decided to maneuver into an industry, digital marketing, that was going to really change my career trajectory, right? Like that was really the start of it all for me. But I originally wanted to be a counselor, and then ended up not doing that. But I'm glad that I had that experience, because psychology is an interesting subject, and when you can understand people's behaviors, it really does help
Yeah.
your career.
I'm with you on that. That is something that, especially as an executive, as you move up the ladder, you got to understand the people who are working for you. You
100%.
you got to understand body language and all these things. Sometimes people take those things, they don't really think about it. They're like, oh, I'm just gonna go to work. But reading the room and having that skill set as well too, you really got two powerhouses right there that
Yeah,
can truly help you out
and
in
it's
any type of work environment.
100%, and it's understanding people's personalities. It just really is. It's important, because you can be a leader or you can be a boss, and bosses aren't all leaders.
That's true. That is true. And there's a lot of books on those stuff and documentation that people could read up on. It's important to know those different personalities and how to read through them, and and different ways of communicating, because that's also a big thing as well too when you're in those positions. Now, with like your experience in like the digital marketing channel, could you highlight like a project that you probably worked on in which you're very like proud of, and like how did you deliver that?
I've been involved in so many projects over the years, but interestingly enough, we did some really cool stuff when I got into the automotive vertical. In 2015, I started at AutoNation in 2014, and in 2015 we launched a program, but they brought me in to build out their programmatic advertising program, which is like display advertising, the banner advertising you see online, and video with dynamic creative in a very complex environment. It was the first of its kind. No one in automotive was really even doing it at the time. I think people were trying to figure it out, but there's so much complexity in this space that it made it difficult for people to figure it out. So with manufacturer mandates around branding, and then legal mandates by state, from a consumer perspective, we needed to build a program for the masses at scale, over 300 plus stores, but also ensure we were meeting the demands of the manufacturers and abiding by state consumer laws. So that was a very intense project that we were able to launch, still exists to this day, has evolved tremendously. It's had great success with creating demand for awareness for the organization. But then on the cusp of like getting that launched, we started like Facebook before Meta. Facebook was actually starting to advertise for e-com businesses, and they were doing a great job, but they weren't creating ad units for automotive. So I got together with a couple of folks in the industry, and we basically created our own feed with the use of some ad units that they had available to us for e-com business, and we retrofitted it for automotive, which I still feel to this day was a push for that company to say, you know what, I think we need to create ad units for automotive, because they're already doing it. So it was interesting, because after we did launch it and we ran it for a while, they did finally introduce an automotive product ad that can be used. And today it's a part of everybody's marketing mix, which is pretty incredible. So those two things were probably the funnest times in creation of new ways to market in the automotive industry. And I feel like it had paved a way for several other automotive companies to jump on that bandwagon. And then, of course, Meta just, they decided to cultivate it and they grew it more. And now it's everybody's doing it now. But there was a day when no one was really doing it. It was maybe us and one other company. And we were part of that, spearheading that initiative.
A little trendsetter. Cool.
Definitely.
You were starting it off. And I can imagine, you were out there doing your thing, and no one ever knows, where is it going to go,
right?
Who's going to pick it up, right? But when you're doing it for all the right intentions. You're like, I think this is what we need to implement, and before you know it, it works. And I used to read, matter of fact, Tony Robbins. I went to one of his seminars, and he mentioned, you never want to be the first, but you never want to be the last. But you want to be somewhere in the middle. But you were like in the front line of it.
We were in the front, but here's the thing: we launched it, but we had downfalls with it too. Like there were things that we tried that failed, and we learned from it. Like we launched some type of ad unit for lead generation 3 days before the end of the month. Don't ever do that. That was the biggest mistake we could have ever made, because we really dropped in like 2,000 leads overnight, and there was no way they were going to be able to work all those leads to sell cars in 3 days till the end of the month. So we learned some lessons along the way, and we fixed some things. We iterated. When you fail, you have to fail fast and iterate. That's what you have to do.
It seems that you definitely have a skill for adaptability right there.
100%.
And as a Latina, I know adaptability is sometimes often a key trait, right? Like now with both your experience in both IT, marketing, how do you work on being sharper than that tool?
So I think back to that role in IT, and it's interesting because it was a time in my life where I had been through a couple of jobs at a couple of different companies, and I was feeling pretty beat up by marketing in general. And I thought, well, maybe it's time for a change, and I need to embrace that, not be afraid of it, and get into IT and really truly understand how to round out my experience as a marketer, because IT and marketers tend to clash a lot. And I wanted to learn the language, so to speak, so that I could become a better marketer. So it was really all about learning like a new way of communication that differed from what I was used to. And, as a marketer, we deal with tons of like gray areas, making assumptions off new ideas and testing them while reading through the noise. But in IT, it felt more like black and white. There were a lot of fixers. I call them fixers in IT because that's what they do. They fix things all day long, right? Mm-hmm. And it really helped me to become a better communicator. But the adaptability component of it was really just me not being afraid to change and to try something new.
Change is always a hard thing.
Very hard for some.
It's for some people, right? Some people are like, I don't care. I'm leaving right now, right? But change is definitely one of those things. Now, as a woman, I wanted to ask you this question. How did you, like, through all of this right here, from hearing your stories of corporate America and finding your way, how did you find your voice along the way?
Persistence.
Okay.
A lot of persistence, like blocking out the noise of others putting a label on you is really important. As women, we tend to get labeled quite a bit. So I saw this on LinkedIn one day and I was reading through it and I was like, this resonates with me. But, if you're labeled aggressive, keep being assertive. If you're labeled as bossy, keep on leading. If you're difficult, keep on telling the truth. If you're intimidating, maintain your confidence. And people have labeled me with being intense. I want to keep my passion. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I think just persistence, really. And again, goes back to that reading the room, right? and just really learning and continuing the process of learning as you grow in your career.
Now, your leadership skills, right? I know that you have one of your strengths is like transformational leadership, right? Can you like share an example of how you led like a team or organization do like a significant, transformation, and like how did you achieve that?
So in 2020, I decided to walk away from AutoNation for a bit.
Okay.
I had there were a lot of changes from a leadership perspective, and I met myself with my biggest challenge at the time of working with someone who didn't want to be worked with. At least that's how I perceived it. And it was a difficult road and a difficult decision, but I made it for me. And in 2020, I left the organization. And I went to work for a company called Greystar, which is a real estate, multifamily residential real estate company, and huge company, very big organization. I was going to be working from home. It was literally the week before the world shut down during COVID. So starting a new job, I was 100% remote, which I had never done before. And I was leading a team that I never met face to face. I met one person at the company and before I started there, and it was the person I reported to. And he was the only one I met before because I'd met him a couple weeks prior to COVID. And then after that, we were on lockdown. So I met nobody else face to face. So they put me in front of a new team who didn't know me. They also didn't know they were hiring me till I would say a week before I started, which was odd for me and for them, right? For me and for them. So it was this challenge of how am I going to lead this team who does not know me from a hole in the wall and doesn't have the ability to say, hey, let's go to lunch. Hey, let's get to know each other, because we were virtual and we were all in different states. So 3 months into that job, first of all, was trying to make sure that everybody had a reason to trust me, because that's the first thing you have to build is trust with any team. And 3 months into that role, we had a major acquisition, major. It literally flipped-flopped everything within the organization. We went from managing 1,500 properties to over 2,400 overnight, which is huge. And it meant having to work with newer people. And there was this sense of uneasiness through all of it. And I had to help maintain the team's motivation and maintain their ability to stay on track with what we needed to accomplish. And that was a big deal for them and for me. And it taught me patience, like the utmost in patience, but it also brought us together in a way that I think I've never experienced before, because we were virtual and they saw the changes happening, but I kept them calm and I kept them informed. And the fact that I was able to communicate with them and keep them informed, that's when the trust started to grow. And that's when I was able to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Come along with me for the ride. And they did. And it was amazing. And we built the team. We actually reorganized the team. We brought some great ideas to some new innovations that they were going to implement. And I was part of a real digital transformation that was happening within the organization at the time. So during the 2.5 years that I was there, it was pivotal for me from a professional perspective, because it was a different kind of a job. And it was pivotal for the people that were working with me too, because they were learning something different from someone who completely opposite from who they were working with before. But it was a change in how they were managing their business from a digital perspective, because that's what they brought me in for. But it was great. I mean, the outcome was a larger team, new insights, and the ability to really understand what they were doing and how things could be better.
And in this time, like, I know that could you talk a little bit more about your current role right now in the company you work for?
So I came back to AutoNation in
Yeah.
2022, so last year. And one of the reasons why.
I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. How long were you away from AutoNation?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Okay, so 2.5 years. You stepped away. Now you come back.
Now I come back. Not much had changed when I came back.
Well, they might have needed you. They might have needed you on the team.
Right. Well, what some things did change, and some of the things that changed was the turnover because COVID, there was people that left for other jobs. And also the market had changed, like remember in the beginning, everything locked down, cars were not selling. Nobody was doing business in the first month. And during the time of COVID, the automotive industry kind of they had a lot of hurdles that they had to battle. So they kept things very streamlined through the last 2.5 years. So when I came back, they had lost some people, and the ones that were left were basically just keeping things afloat, which was totally fine. They did an amazing job at keeping the wheels on the bus. But we needed to do more than just keep the wheels on the bus. So when I came back with the intention to rebuild the team and make sure that we changed the tires on the bus. And we built new strategies and new ways to be able to go to market and evolve the programs even more than we did in the past. So right now, I manage and oversee all of the performance marketing within our organization for all lines of business. We have several lines of business outside of just selling cars, but all automotive specific. We have a finance company now. We have a mobile repair service. As well as a new micro lease service that we've just offered in a couple of different cities right now. It hasn't fully launched across the U.S. Micro lease means you can lease a car for 6 to 12 months versus the 2 or 3 year period of time. But I'm responsible for the strategy across the digital tactics, so it's all paid performance media.
Oh, you out here doing a lot.
Yeah, we have close to 300 stores. We're across 17 or 19 states now, and we oversee about 32 plus brands. Anything from a Mercedes-Benz to a Maserati to a Porsche. And all the others in between.
You're talking about some big car companies right there. So I wanted to ask you this question. What is the challenges you deal with when you're managing an 8-figure budget campaign?
So with any challenges with any budget, regardless how big or small, there's always challenges, even if you have $1,000 a month budget versus $1 million a month budget. It's just a number, but there's always challenges because there's always people's opinions. It's like the same thing as if you were producing creative. Let's say you were producing a creative imagery for a website, or just creating a website for that matter. Everyone will always have an opinion of what looks good. And that can make it challenging and difficult to make final decisions. But I think, for me and my team, we think equally alike, and we want what's best for the company. So we treat their investment as if it's our own investment, hence making the best decision based on data. And that's what we tell our internal teams when they ask questions, why we're not spending here versus there, why are we not doing this versus that. We make data-driven decisions, and that's how we invest the dollars. And sometimes that goes over well, and sometimes you have to explain it a little more, but that's okay.
And through this transition, you come back into AutoNation. I'm assuming there was some highs and some lows, right? You come back. What is a low moment that you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
So there was a year, and I'll tell you a little bit about the story of what happened to me here, but there was a year, again, I mentioned I was a single mom for a long time. In 2012, I literally had 4 jobs in 1 year. 4 jobs. I had worked for a company for 3 years. They let me go. There was a layoff. Several of us got let go. And then I landed a position with a small firm, small company, to be their director of marketing at the time. And they weren't the right fit for me. So I left to go work for another company, third in the year. And this company, I came in to lead their digital initiatives. And within 6 weeks of me arriving, the owner of the company, it was a privately held organization, the owner of the company came in and literally let 300 of us go in one day with
Jeez.
no paycheck to back it up. So that was my third job in the year. And that was before I went into IT. I was like, oh, I'm so beat up by marketing, what is going on? But, resilience is what it showed me. I was very resilient through all of that, knowing that everybody has these low moments in their life through their career. You're doing great, then things aren't so great. When you're doing great, then things aren't so great. Peaks and valleys. I actually created a chart of my leadership story, which shows all those peaks and valleys. And I was in a group of women in a leadership conference one time, and they took a look at my leadership story. And I said, what word comes to mind when you see this? And they all said the same thing: resilience, because you got right back up again, back on the horse, and you just kept on moving forward, which was great, because that is true. But it was hard. It wasn't easy. I was always concerned. Am I going to have a roof over my head? Am I going to be able to get shoes for my daughter, for her? There was all of those things. I was most concerned about her. I wasn't really concerned about me, obviously I wanted to eat, but I wanted to make sure she had food on the table. So there was always the second mouth to have to worry about, to make sure that I was taking care of her, which is why I kept always pushing forward and pushing forward. But also, the moment that I mentioned earlier too, about some of the things that I dealt with when I was here, automotive is only 27% of women in automotive lead in like positions that are executive level. That is a very low number. I am in an industry that is mostly run by men. And that could be the same for a lot of other industries too, but it is definitely known in this industry that there are not a lot of women in leading positions. And I want to change that. There's many of us in this industry that want to change that. And there are some men that will be your advocate. And then there are some that just don't really care, and they only care about their own agenda. And I think that's what I experienced before I left, is I was in sort of that circle working with someone that really only cared about his own agenda. And it made it difficult for me not only to lead a team, but lead a team as a woman, leading a team of women.
Latina women as well.
It became difficult because it was something that was hard to hide.
It's hard when people have their own agenda and they're not working as a team.
Right.
It's like, that's why it's called a team and not individuals. Obviously we're all individuals getting there, but we're supposed to be a team. So when someone has their own agenda, I know that could obviously throw a lot of things off,
It can.
And especially when you're saying one thing and the other person is doing the other.
And that happened quite a bit. So,
oh, wow.
But my circumstances really did change in returning back to this industry and to this organization. So once the circumstances changed in that way, and I saw the opportunity to rebuild something again, I was extremely interested in doing that, especially since it tapped into things that I'm very passionate about with respect to the digital tactics that we manage and run internally.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all this being said, and you have this entrepreneurial, spirit. Could you describe a moment that you took, like let's say, a calculated risk, and it paid off in your career?
I think that, there's two, but I think moving into IT was definitely a calculated risk. I walked into my job. I will tell you, my job was to manage a software implementation with Salesforce, Salesforce, the company, a software implementation across a 300-seat call center. I had a marketing background. I never had developers reporting into me before, and I had developers reporting into me in that job. And I, didn't know the first thing about a CRM like Salesforce and implementation of it. So there were times where I was sitting in in meetings, and I didn't even know what question to ask because I'd never implemented a software such as that ever. I had been exposed to it as a user, but not as somebody who had to understand the components that it needed to build the platform the way that all of these stakeholders needed it to be built. So that was really hard. And there were days where I would be in the bathroom just like in tears because I felt like the biggest, like I just didn't feel smart for a long time because it wasn't what I knew how to do, but I was willing to learn it and I got through it, but it took a lot of grit to get through it. And I stuck it out for a year and a half almost, and just then realized this is what I miss my marketing days. I miss what I did in marketing. I'm happy for the experience, really happy that I had an opportunity to do that. But I definitely didn't want to go back and do that ever again. And then oddly enough, I take another risk and leave AutoNation to go to Graystar. And 2 weeks before I start, my boss, who he'll probably hear this because I'll share it with him at some point, my old boss says, I need you to lead a Salesforce project at Graystar for us. And I was like, oh God, no, I got to do this all over again. But it was different this time. It was definitely different this time. And this time, that time that I did it, I knew what questions I had to ask because I had that experience before. So even though that was a risk, it did pay off because I was able to revisit that again. And now if I ever had to do it again, I could, and I would know the questions that I need to ask.
And you're always surprised, when you're put in a situation, you have to like excel, and like you're like questioning, like, wait, I don't even have the tools to make this happen. But then all of a sudden you get it done, right? And that comes back to what you were talking about, the grit, that passion. You said you were willing to learn. Then that's a very big thing that you mentioned. It wasn't like you were like, I just don't know how to do it. I'm willing to learn and improve. Those are skills, skill sets that people just need to acquire, especially when you're in an environment and you're at a place where someone is looking at you like, you're that good. We trust you, because they have to trust you.
Right.
At the end of the day, they gotta be like, look, you're the one. We're gonna pass it to you.
100%.
And you're like, wait, hold on now. Let's slow down. They're like, no, you're the person for the job. And you're like, oh.
But I honestly don't think that the boss that I've had some very interesting bosses. I'm not going to call them leaders. I'm going to call them bosses. But the person that I worked for there didn't trust me at all. Like I think he knew. I think he knew early on that I was in over my head, but he didn't lend too much of a hand to me at all. So that was unfortunate, really unfortunate. So I had to lean on others to help, but there was an environment that was created there that people that worked for this person, none of them really cared for him and none of them really wanted to support him. So hence they didn't support me, which made it that much harder for me to get through that project. But then I learned a hard lesson when I said, okay, well, I'm just going to lean on the implementation company because they're going to help me get through this because they want to look good through this project. Little did I know, because I had never led an IT type project like this before. Little did I know that they were going to charge for every hour or 15 minutes or 10 minutes that I spoke with them on the phone when I needed a question answered. I found that out real quick when I got the first invoice, and I had to back off from that and then figure it out for myself after that, which was very, very hard.
Look at that. And with you being a Latina leader right there through that whole situation right there, what advice do you give to like fellow Latina aspiring individuals that are looking to make it in the digital marketing industry?
Build strong networks. For me, this has been the most important thing. Just connecting with professionals within your field, both in your company, outside your organization, attending industry events. Like those things are so important and can go such a long way when you build strong networks. And setting clear goals and just knowing what you want to achieve in your career. being patient and learning, committing yourself to lifelong learning, staying up to date, industry trends, seeking out knowledge, investing in your own personal development even is important, and just developing really overall a growth mindset, like adopt a positive attitude towards learning from mistakes and being open to feedback to change that over time. Just comfort level of stepping outside of your comfort zone and taking on challenging projects like that one that I took on with Salesforce. That was an extremely challenging project.
You made it through. But
Showing initiative, yep. And I'm a prideful worker, so I have ownership over my work.
Let's get it.
That's important to me.
Let's get it. Let's get it. And I know you're also an ambassador for leading women executives. Is that correct?
Yeah, I tell you about the program. It's a really interesting program, and I was lucky enough to be chosen to go. AutoNation had a CEO at one point who is a woman. She was an incredible leader, and she chose me. She actively said, I want Melissa to go to this leadership program and become an ambassador of leading women's executives. And it's a leadership course, one in which you're in a setting with many other women from all types of different companies. Some of the women I was sitting with were CMOs, CEOs, then you had senior directors, VPs. I was in this room with very successful women that also experienced challenges in their careers. And we sat in this group it was a 4-month program. And every couple of weeks we would fly to Chicago together, and we would sit in a room, shut our phones off, shut our computers off, and just really learn how to deal with the challenges in workspace, how to advocate for yourself, what to look for in a mentor, negotiating for yourself at work. But one of the first few things they taught us, and this is where I did my leadership journey description, and how I encountered other women saying, you're resilient. They really teach you about yourself. We went through a Hogan assessment similar to something like the Myers-Briggs, but a little bit different. And you just really learn a lot about you and the things that you may be doing right and the things that you may be doing wrong. And it humbles you because you start to realize, oh, I probably could have done that differently. And for me, it opened my eyes to understand the things that I can do that are perceived a different way by another person. So I'm comfortable enough now to say, I'm going to apologize now because I'm very forward, and sometimes that can come off wrong. And I learned that because I became a part of this program, and now I'm an official ambassador of that program, along with many other women that have gone through the same program. And if you have an opportunity to pitch that at a company, as women are listening to this, you should pitch it and learn about Leading Women's Executive Program, because it really is a great program.
Mm-hmm. It's an honor to be a part of something like that.
Well, yes, an honor for sure.
And did you ever think that you would ever be in a position like that?
No, I didn't. And I certainly didn't think someone would handpick me. That's for sure. I mean, I've been through other leadership programs before. We do the Myers-Briggs. I've done the DISC assessment to learn about communication, things like that. But this was very different. It was me and 2 other women that went, that I did not even know them at the company. We were working for the same company. None of us knew each other, met each other at the airport, and then, got to know each other while we were going through the program. But we also got to know a bunch of other women that were also having challenges, and it was great to be able to be in an environment, to be free to speak about what you want to speak about candidly and not be judged for it.
I like the fact that you were hand selected. That lets you that story right there speaks in regards to the character, the individual that you are, the work ethic that you have, that you're like, I was surprised that they even picked me. That means that people are always watching.
I was questioning when I got the email. I'm like, this has to be, maybe it's a phishing thing. Like maybe it's a fake.
That imposter syndrome right there. Yeah, you're like, hold on, this ain't right.
Oh my gosh, totally. I was self-doubting. I was doubting myself, and I was looking to see. And then I asked my boss, I'm like, did you hear about this? He's like, I didn't hear about this. And then I asked one other person, and they're like, yes, Melissa, this is you. You're in this. And I was like
Wow.
so taken back. I was so taken back that I actually kept it to myself for a very long time.
You didn't want to share it because you just wanted to make sure it was right. It was
I
true.
wanted to make sure it was right. And I also I didn't want to make it seem like I was bragging about it to anybody, because I didn't want anybody to get the wrong idea. And I also didn't want anybody to feel like, why wasn't I chosen?
Yeah. Well, the reason why is because you're not Melissa.
Right.
Let's get it straight right there, team. Let's get. I'm a part of the team, Melissa, right now.
Right.
I wanted this. We going to keep. Remember how you said you're very upfront. You're not Melissa. Bottom line, get it right.
Exactly.
If you want to level up like Melissa, then we could talk. But
that's
you're
right.
not. You know what I'm saying? But
right. You got it.
I just had to. I'm just rooting for you, Melissa. I'm rooting for you, right? Now,
Awesome.
I know in your career you've seen like a lot of that digital marketing landscape and evolve. Like there's so many different trends. Do you believe there'll be the most profound impact on the industry in coming years?
So AI.
Oh yes.
Enough said, right?
Enough said. You said the key letters right there. AI. Not even a whole sentence. AI.
Listen, automated marketing platforms, so you still need people. Let's make this like really clear. AI is what it is, and everybody's still trying to figure it out. Chat GPT. I love Chat GPT. Love it. Use it all the time. But you still need people.
Yes, you do need bodies. You need emotions. You need, yeah.
You still need people to make some decisions. You still need people to validate. So partnering and welcoming machine learning is going to be essential in any marketer's toolkit. But be wise about it. Be wise about it, because it is a scary thing right now. There's a lot of people trying to figure out AI. I get it, but it is not going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So just embrace it.
There's a lot of it is because there's so many different options out there. If you don't do the research, you could put your information out there on the internet, give it out to, oh, it's this AI. They're gonna, do the digital stuff, but then it could backfire on you. You have to really look into that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's not as easy as people would think it is. It makes sense. Automated, hey, look, they're going to be sending out the marketing campaigns where you could program it in and say, look, I want you to do it every first of the month. This is the advertisement for it. It's basically developing your own team.
Yes,
but if you don't do it the right way,
yes, it can be dangerous. You have to be careful. But how many writers out there are utilizing ChatGPT to this day, like to write blogs and articles, and like they use it to help augment their content. Yeah. And you don't need to hire a person to do it, but you still need a person to go and read it and make sure it's accurate.
And it sounds like you. That's another thing, right? AI is AI, but it has to sound like you.
It does.
Right. So it's not like people think sometimes, well, oh, I got AI to do it for me. But then at the same time, you got to go back and make sure it still has your vocabulary, your passion, the AI will give you the script. Then you got to go in. So there's still some work to be done. Some people are like, oh, it's over. I'm tapping out. AI got everything on me.
I know.
It's scary. But, people's got to, be on the trend. Don't be the first, but don't be the last.
No, did you see the 60 Minutes episode on AI, and they were talking about robots and robotics, and it was a pretty interesting
I'm always watching them things. First off, the movie Terminator told us exactly what was going to happen. Yes. Arnold Schwarzenegger said it back. He said, I'll be back. That line right there, basically it was the AI people saying, look, we're going to come back. Right? I see, so when people are like, oh, AI, I'm like, guys, did you not see Terminator? Do we not see it back then? Arnold Schwarzenegger was on to something. we was just in the movie theaters just watching it. Like, oh, it's a good movie. No, people.
Little did we know.
Seriously, right? It was like back then. It was just a movie about robots and stuff, like, and from the future. And we're like, oh yeah, it's just Terminator, right?
And here we are.
Years later, right? We got robots going into stop fires. We got robots in the supermarkets cleaning up spills. What?
That's true.
You got robots for when you're going through the toll system. It's it's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy when you think about all the uses of that now. So yeah.
Nah.
Yes.
Now, throughout your whole journey, I know you mentioned about your family being like the core of everything, right? I know you have a lot of key values. You know, community is one of them. And I want to know, and empathy and stuff. Like, what has helped you become successful? I know those core values. Is there any main thing that has helped you in your success? And what advice would you pass on to those individuals' journey?
5 things. 5 things. And these are 5 things you need to quit doing right now so that you can push forward. And it's really stop trying to please everyone and stop apologizing. Women have this bad habit of apologizing for everything. And I'm guilty of it too. But you need to stop. Don't fear change. Stop living in the past. Stop putting yourself down or doubting yourself. And stop overthinking. Those are like the 5 main things to quit doing now so you can push forward and just, success will come. Like you just need to get those things out.
So we talk about stop pleasing everyone. You were saying, stop overthinking.
Yes. Stop trying to please.
Stop apologizing. Yes. Stop apologizing.
Stop apologizing. I'm guilty of it too. Like, in fact, when I spoke at a conference recently, it was women in automotive, and I actually spoke about mentorship, and I spoke a lot about my family as my core, my background. They are the foundation in my life. And when I started off the beginning, I was super nervous about me speaking there. And I was telling a friend of mine what I was going to start off with. And my start was, I'm really sorry because I'm super nervous today. And she said, why are you apologizing? And I was like, that's a good point. I don't know. That's kind of how I rehearsed it. But she said, don't apologize. You have a right. If you feel nervous, you feel nervous. Just say you do, but don't apologize for it. It's how you feel.
It is sometimes, when we go through life, you're like, like you said, always apologizing versus being like, look, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I needed to do. Right.
Yes.
Bottom line. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Pleasing everyone, that is a very big thing. A lot of the guests on our show had talked about, like, when they're in corporate America, they kind of feel like they have to please everybody. They're like, instead of doing what they feel they know they could do best in, right? They're like, nope, that's not what he would do. That's not what she would do. And then before you know it, you're not being authentic. And that was always a big topic that we always talk about on the show, is about people just feeling like they're not authentic. They're walking around in this corporate environment. They came in as one person, but they're starting to morph into something totally different because they're following the trends of everybody else. And not because they want to follow it, but because it seems like it's being pushed on them to follow that trend. And if you don't, then you're shunned on. You're like, oh, well, here we go. We're going to, this, you're not following protocol. You're not looking this way. We're doing it this way. We want it. And, a lot of that old school stuff, everyone got the old school way of doing things. They're like, this is how we do it. We're not going to change. No. And you come in and you're like, wait, hold on now. I'm from Brooklyn. Like, don't get it twisted.
You can't please everyone. And you have to be okay to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to say no.
You can't be that yes person in the clique.
No, and it's funny that you said that, because insecure leaders tend to surround themselves with yes people. Strong leaders tend to surround themselves with people who challenge them. And that's a very true statement. I've always said I want to hire people who are smarter than me, because I don't have all the answers. And there's nothing wrong with not having all the answers. But just be honest about it. Be true to yourself. Just like you said, be authentic. And, it will work itself out. But if you can keep these things in mind, quit doing them right now, it will benefit you in the long run. For sure.
Let's get it. Come on, Melissa.
Get it?
Come on. And Melissa, just want to say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And also to from the listeners as well, too, that are listening. We just want to thank you so much for just your knowledge, the information, a lot of love to you being very vulnerable about those experiences that kind of were not the best experience, but have kind of helped shape you to be in the profession that you are today. Much success to you, your business, all the things that you got going on over there. Any last words for the listeners?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I want to leave you with one last thing to keep in mind. Your hustle intimidates people who are cool with being average. Remember who you are as a person. Be okay with it. Be okay with it.
Let me snap to that. Let me snap to that. Come on. That was like poetry right there. Come on. Listeners, snapping right now. Listeners.
Online, and I'm like, these are things to live by. Like, you asked me for a quote. My quote is similar to the same thing. Like, passion always looks like aggression to the unmotivated. How true is that?
Come on. You come on. You were talking. If you really think about it and you think about the people who really hate on you sometimes, you really look at those people and like, you're not even moving, right? But why are you hating? But it's because someone who has a lot of passion and drive and sees a lot of success, because consistency leads to victory. You know, people get a little jealous or they get upset at the fact that they just don't have what you have inside of you. But that comes from your culture. That comes from mom and dad, you know, pushing that, you know, instilling that in you at a young age, your upbringing, the schooling you go to. But if you don't experience a lot of things in your life, and if you do, you have to learn from those experiences in order to help build you. So
yes.
Shout out to those people that want to live on that side of the fence. Melissa, you and I, we're here together, okay?
Yes, let's go.
Let's go. You know what I mean? So I just want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Melissa, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.